How to delete your anxiety with those 9 proven ways from Neuroscience. What if I told you that anxiety is not a flaw in your personality, but a function of your brain that can be rewired? Every racing thought, every sleepless night, every moment where your chest feels tight and your mind spins out of control is not proof that you are broken. It is your nervous system sending signals that can be understood, redirected, and transformed. The problem is not that you feel anxious. The problem is that you've never been taught how to interpret what anxiety really is. Modern neuroscience reveals that anxiety is not an invisible curse, but a predictable process. It is your brain's survival system overreacting, amplifying signals meant to protect you, and turning them into loops that trap you. When your amygdala fires too strongly, when your prefrontal cortex loses control, when your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, you enter a state designed for emergencies but triggered by daily life. That is why anxiety feels overwhelming. It is the body's ancient system running at full speed in a modern world. But here is the truth. Most people never hear. Because the brain is plastic, it can be rewired. Neuroplasticity means your mind is not fixed. The same circuits that amplify fear can be trained to restore calm. Andrew Huberman's work shows us how the nervous system can be shifted almost instantly by breath, movement, and even vision. Daniel Goleman explains how emotional intelligence gives us tools to reframe and regulate, turning anxiety into clarity instead of chaos. And philosophers from Marcus Aurelius to Montaigne knew that fear, when confronted with reason and discipline, becomes the very teacher of strength. In this video, I will share 9 proven methods from neuroscience that do not just mask anxiety temporarily, but retrain the brain itself. These are not shallow tips or cliches you've already heard. They are strategies rooted in biology, psychology, and timeless wisdom. Some of them work in seconds, others reshape your mind over time, but each one is a tool to delete the patterns of fear and replace them with patterns of focus, resilience, and calm. By the end, you will see that anxiety is not an enemy but a signal that your brain is ready for change, that your nervous system is asking for new patterns, and that your life does not have to be ruled by fear. The 9 ways you are about to learn are not theories. They are science in action, practices that can transform the way your brain responds to stress and give you back control. Truth about anxiety: it's not an enemy, but a signal. Most people treat anxiety as if it were a personal defect, something to be ashamed of, or something that proves they are weak. But neuroscience and philosophy tell a different story. Anxiety is not your enemy. It is a signal. It is your nervous system doing its job of detecting threats. Only it has become hypersensitive in a world full of constant stimulation, uncertainty, and pressure. What feels like an attack is actually an overactive survival mechanism, designed to protect you but misfiring in everyday life. Andrew Huberman explains that the autonomic nervous system has 2 branches: the sympathetic, which prepares you for fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, which restores calm and balance. Anxiety is what happens when the sympathetic system overpowers the parasympathetic, flooding your body with stress hormones, even when there is no real danger. Your brain is not broken. It is simply responding to false alarms. This is where philosophy sharpens the perspective. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that fear is often perception, not fact. We suffer not because of reality itself, but because of the stories our mind tells about it. Anxiety exaggerates those stories, creating imagined disasters, looping over what-ifs, and convincing you that catastrophe is always near. The key is not to suppress anxiety, but to decode it. Cognitive behavioral therapy builds on this principle. By questioning the thoughts behind your anxiety, you begin to see that most of them are distortions, exaggerations of risk, underestimations of your strength, predictions that rarely come true. When you realize that anxiety is not evidence of weakness, but a message from your brain, you shift from shame to curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" you ask, "What is my body trying to tell me, and how can I respond differently?" Seen in this light, anxiety is no longer a flaw. It is a compass pointing toward the places where you need to grow stronger, where your nervous system needs to be retrained. The following methods are not about fighting anxiety into silence, but about transforming your relationship with it, turning the signal of fear into the foundation of resilience. Method 1. Physiological sigh, immediate reset. When anxiety strikes, the body often takes shallow, rapid breaths that keep carbon dioxide trapped in the system and amplify feelings of panic. Trying to take a deep breath rarely helps, because long inhales without proper release can actually intensify the stress response. Neuroscience has uncovered a far more effective tool: the physiological sigh. This simple breathing pattern, 2 quick inhales through the nose followed by 1 long, slow exhale through the mouth, has been shown to calm the amygdala, lower stress hormone levels, and restore balance in the nervous system within minutes. Andrew Huberman's research demonstrates that this method works because the second inhale reinflates tiny air sacs in the lungs that collapse under stress. This maximizes oxygen exchange and helps expel excess carbon dioxide, which is often responsible for the suffocating sensation that comes with anxiety. The extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, sending a direct signal of safety to the body and brain. Unlike meditation or slow breathing exercises that may take several minutes, the physiological sigh can bring noticeable relief almost instantly. What makes this approach unique is its simplicity and accessibility. You don't need a quiet space, special equipment, or long practice sessions. You can do it at your desk before a meeting, in your car, before walking into an interview, or even in the middle of a sleepless night when your mind won't stop racing. It's a biological reset button, one backed not by vague wellness trends but by hard neuroscience. Philosophically, this practice aligns with Stoic principles. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to return to the present, to anchor his mind in what is real rather than in imagined fears. The physiological sigh is the body's way of anchoring itself back to reality, breaking the loop of panic and restoring clarity in the moment. Anxiety may feel like it owns your body, but with this simple technique, you prove that your body can listen to you. One sigh at a time, you teach your nervous system that fear does not control the outcome. You do. Method 2. Labeling anxiety. Name it to tame it. One of the most powerful yet underestimated tools for managing anxiety is deceptively simple. Give it a name. When emotions remain unspoken, they flood the nervous system unchecked, keeping the amygdala hyperactive and the body in survival mode. But when you label what you feel, saying to yourself, "This is fear, this is worry," or "this is anxiety," you shift brain activity from the emotional centers into the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, planning, and regulation. In that moment, you begin to regain control. This principle is backed strongly by cognitive behavioral therapy. Thoughts and emotions lose intensity when brought into conscious awareness because the brain processes them differently once they are named. Neuroscience studies show that the simple act of labeling an emotion reduces amygdala activation, creating measurable calm. It doesn't erase the feeling, but it shrinks its power and gives you space to respond instead of react. Philosophically, this echoes Montaigne's wisdom. He believed that unexamined fears grow in the shadows, but when articulated, they lose their mystery and reveal their true, smaller size. Anxiety thrives in silence, multiplying in the mind until it feels insurmountable. Naming it is like switching on a light in a dark room. You see that the monster was only a shadow. Labeling also disrupts the spiral of self-criticism. Instead of saying, "I'm weak because I feel this way," you learn to say, "I'm experiencing anxiety right now, but it's just a state. It will pass." This shift removes judgment and replaces it with perspective. Practical application is straightforward. In the middle of an anxious moment, pause and verbalize. "I'm noticing my heart race." That's anxiety. Or write it down in a journal. "I feel anxious because I'm uncertain about this outcome." Once expressed, the emotion transforms from an overwhelming storm into data, information that can be processed, understood, and managed. Naming your anxiety doesn't make you fragile, it makes you aware. And awareness is the first step to mastery. Method 3. Cold exposure for nervous system reset. Anxiety often feels like fire running through your veins. Your heart races, your breath shortens, and your thoughts accelerate beyond control. One of the fastest ways to disrupt this cycle is not warm comfort, but deliberate cold. Neuroscience shows that cold exposure, whether through a cold shower, a splash of icy water on the face, or immersing yourself briefly in cold conditions, activates the vagus nerve, which directly stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural calming mechanism. Andrew Huberman has highlighted how cold exposure triggers a powerful release of dopamine and norepinephrine, not in fleeting bursts, but in sustained waves that can last for hours. This unique neurochemical effect not only reduces baseline anxiety, but also sharpens focus, stabilizes mood, and strengthens resilience. Cold shocks the system out of spiraling panic and resets it toward balance. The Stoics practiced deliberate discomfort for the same reason. Seneca advised sleeping on the ground or wearing rough clothes from time to time, not to punish himself, but to remind his body and mind that discomfort could be endured without fear. Cold exposure is a modern version of this timeless principle. By voluntarily facing physical stress, you teach your nervous system that you are capable of regulating under pressure. Beyond immediate calm, the deeper benefit is resilience. Each exposure conditions your body to tolerate stress instead of collapsing under it. This is stress inoculation at work. Small doses of controlled adversity build long-term stability. Over time, the brain stops interpreting discomfort as danger, and this adaptation carries over into emotional stress as well. Cold exposure does not eliminate the challenges of life, but it recalibrates your system to meet them. Each time you step into the cold, you are training your body to choose courage over panic, clarity over chaos. What once felt unbearable becomes the very tool that teaches you mastery. Method 4. Eye position and gaze control. Most people don't realize that the way you use your eyes directly affects the state of your nervous system. When anxiety rises, your gaze tends to narrow, scanning the environment as if danger is near. This tunnel vision locks your brain into survival mode, signaling the amygdala to stay alert and fueling the cycle of fear. But neuroscience shows that changing how you look at the world can instantly shift how your brain interprets your state. Andrew Huberman's research demonstrates that widening your gaze into panoramic vision, softening your focus and allowing your eyes to take in the periphery, lowers activity in the stress circuits of the brain. This broad visual field tells the nervous system that you are safe, reducing the urgency of the fight-or-flight response. Conversely, when you intentionally lower your visual field, such as by looking down slightly, the body associates it with calmness and restoration, activating the parasympathetic system. This might sound simple, but it's powerful. In moments of anxiety, you don't need to wait for hours of meditation or weeks of practice. You can step outside, shift your gaze to the horizon, let your eyes rest on the sky or an open space, and within minutes, your physiology begins to change. By altering your vision, you change your state. Philosophically, this resonates with the Stoics' teaching on perspective. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to look at life from above, to take the wider view rather than being trapped in the immediacy of fear. Gaze control is a physical embodiment of that wisdom. Expanding your sight expands your mind, and narrowing it when appropriate grounds your focus. Anxiety convinces you that you are trapped in a storm. By changing how you see, you remind your brain that the world is bigger than your fear, and in that space, calm begins to return. Method 5. Dopamine and habit loops. Anxiety often feels random, but in truth it is deeply tied to how your brain's reward system operates. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter that drives motivation and anticipation, is not only about pleasure, it's about prediction. When your brain expects a reward and doesn't receive it, or when it constantly chases stimulation without structure, anxiety often fills the gap. The mind begins to loop on unfinished tasks, unresolved fears, and endless what-ifs, creating a restless state that feels impossible to escape. Andrew Huberman explains that small wins, consistently achieved, recalibrate the dopamine system. By breaking goals into achievable steps and rewarding progress, you train your brain to expect stability rather than chaos. This resets the anxiety loop because your nervous system learns that effort leads to predictable results. Instead of spiraling into uncertainty, you build a rhythm of trust between your actions and your brain's chemistry. Aristotle described something similar centuries ago. He taught that character is the sum of habits, and that repeated actions shape who we become. In modern terms, habits restructure dopamine pathways. Each time you choose discipline over avoidance, focus over distraction, you are literally reshaping the chemistry of your brain, making calm and clarity easier to access. Cognitive behavioral therapy confirms this with its emphasis on behavioral activation. Anxiety lessens when you act, even in small ways, because action proves to your brain that progress is possible. The opposite, inaction, feeds uncertainty and deepens the spiral. The lesson is simple but powerful. Don't wait for a massive breakthrough to end anxiety. Build small, intentional loops of action and reward. Each completed task, each step forward, is not just progress on the outside, it is a rewiring of the inside. Over time, dopamine stops fueling restless anxiety and starts fueling steady resilience. Method 6. Anchoring meaning to anxiety. Anxiety becomes unbearable when it feels meaningless, like random suffering without purpose. But neuroscience and philosophy converge on a critical insight. The way you interpret anxiety changes its impact on your brain and your life. When you see anxiety as evidence of weakness, it drains you. When you see it as preparation for growth, it strengthens you. The experience doesn't change, but the meaning you assign to it rewires the way your nervous system encodes it. Andrew Huberman has explained that reframing stress as readiness can alter the very chemistry of the brain. When the body interprets rapid heartbeat and shallow breath as preparation rather than danger, dopamine and adrenaline can be harnessed to sharpen focus instead of triggering panic. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your interpretation trains your brain to respond differently next time. Viktor Frankl, who endured unthinkable suffering, argued that those who could anchor their pain to meaning were the ones who endured. Jordan Peterson builds on this, insisting that responsibility, the willingness to connect your suffering to a higher goal, transforms chaos into order. Anxiety then becomes a signal, not of collapse, but of the threshold of growth. Philosophically, Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle becomes the way. Anxiety, reframed, is not the wall blocking your progress, but the doorway pointing you toward the areas of your life that demand strength. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the question becomes, "What strength is this moment calling me to develop?" When you anchor anxiety to meaning, you stop being its victim and start being its student. The same sensations that once paralyzed you can become signals of purpose, sharpening your focus, deepening your resilience, and guiding you toward a life of greater clarity. Method 7. Movement and bilateral stimulation. When anxiety takes hold, the body wants to move, but modern life often traps us in stillness. You sit with racing thoughts, frozen in place, while your nervous system begs for release. This disconnection between mental overload and physical inaction intensifies the panic. Neuroscience shows that movement, especially bilateral stimulation, alternating motion between the left and right sides of the body, can disrupt this anxious loop and restore calm. Andrew Huberman explains that walking, running, or even lateral eye movements activate brain areas involved in emotional regulation. This is not just about getting fresh air. Bilateral movement mimics REM sleep patterns, a time when the brain naturally processes emotional stress. That's why a simple walk, especially outdoors, can feel like therapy in motion. It lowers amygdala activation, recenters cognitive focus, and restores rhythm to an anxious system. In psychotherapy, techniques like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, rely on this principle to treat trauma. The brain needs movement to release locked emotional energy, especially during heightened stress. Bilateral stimulation helps unstick emotional memories and ease anxiety by integrating the nervous system into a synchronized rhythm. Philosophically, Aristotle taught his students while walking. The peripatetic method wasn't just a style, it was a reflection of how motion fuels clarity. Movement grounds abstract thought in physical space, calming the storm of overthinking and aligning the mind with the body. When you move, you prove to your brain that you are not stuck. Each step, each swing of the arm, is a message. We're safe, we're processing, we're moving forward. Anxiety loses strength when the body begins to lead the mind back to balance. Method 8. Nutrition and neurochemistry. Anxiety is not only a mental or emotional state, it is also biochemical. What you feed your body directly affects how your brain functions, especially when it comes to regulating mood, focus, and stress response. The gut-brain axis, often overlooked in traditional discussions about anxiety, is now at the forefront of neuroscience. Your digestive system doesn't just process food, it helps regulate neurotransmitters like serotonin, which plays a critical role in stabilizing mood and promoting calm. In fact, more than 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut. When the gut is inflamed due to processed foods, excess sugar, or lack of nutrients, this chemical balance is disrupted. The result is often low mood, irritability, poor focus, and heightened anxiety. Andrew Huberman emphasizes that dietary interventions can improve emotional stability by supporting gut health and enhancing the brain's ability to respond to stress. Foods rich in omega-3s, magnesium, tryptophan, and probiotics have been shown to improve mood regulation and reduce baseline anxiety. Endorphins also play a key role here. These natural painkillers, released through movement, fasting, laughter, or exposure to cold, create a soothing effect on both body and mind. Regular practices that stimulate endorphin production are essential to building mental resilience, not just physically, but neurologically. Philosophically, Montaigne advocated for balance and moderation as the path to mental clarity. He believed that the body and soul were not separate, but intertwined, and that discipline in one nourished strength in the other. The wisdom still holds. A body in chaos rarely sustains a calm mind. To delete anxiety at its roots, you must not only address thought, but fuel the chemistry that supports mental calm. This isn't about perfection, but about awareness. Noticing how what you eat, drink, and consume either feeds your fear or supports your stability. Ritualized journaling and externalization. Anxiety often thrives in silence. What remains unspoken, unnamed, and unexamined grows in the shadows of the mind. But the act of writing, of giving shape to thought and form to emotion, can dismantle that darkness. Ritualized journaling is not just a therapeutic suggestion, it is a neuroscientific intervention. When you write about your internal experiences, you shift those emotional events from the amygdala, where fear and reaction dominate, to the prefrontal cortex, where reasoning and meaning-making occur. Studies in cognitive behavioral therapy show that journaling helps restructure memory encoding. It creates a new frame through which the brain recalls the event, reducing emotional charge and increasing clarity. You're not just processing emotions, you're reprogramming your perception. Andrew Huberman points to writing as a form of behavioral tagging. When done consistently, it rewires attention loops and emotional salience. But journaling is more than just a brain hack. It's a conversation with the self. Think of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, writing meditations not for the world, but for his own soul. His daily writings weren't content. They were cognitive recalibrations. They were reminders of what mattered, what passed, what remained, and what must be faced again with courage. Externalizing thoughts gives them boundaries. It takes what is amorphous and threatening in the mind and turns it into something seen, named, and faced. Once on paper, anxiety loses its mystery. You begin to see its pattern, its origins, its exaggerated loops, and with that awareness, you can begin to dismantle it. A consistent writing ritual, even 5 minutes a day, becomes a neurological mirror. It reflects what your mind is holding and teaches your brain to let go. It anchors you in clarity. It restores internal order. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds you that anxiety does not define you. It's just a message, and you now have the tools to answer it. You began this journey thinking that anxiety was something to suppress, escape from, or silence with force. But now you see the truth. It's not an enemy. It's a messenger, wired deep within your nervous system, built to protect you, alert you, and, if approached the right way, evolve you. What once felt like chaos now becomes a map. Each method you've just learned is not a temporary bandage, but a reprogramming tool, grounded in neuroscience and anchored in timeless wisdom. Before, you may have seen anxiety as a flaw. After today, you can begin to see it as a signal of your brain's readiness to grow, adapt, and heal. A call to action, not for panic, but for awareness. Each breath, each written word, every moment of discomfort can become a building block of resilience. You now understand how your dopamine pathways respond to meaning, how your visual system can shift your state, how your gut can shape your mind, and how ancient thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and modern neuroscientists like Andrew Huberman speak the same truth in different languages. You have more control than you were ever taught to believe. So now I ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? Which method will you integrate today, not as a fix, but as a foundation? Comment below. Not just for you, but for someone else scrolling through this video who's quietly battling their own war with anxiety. Your insight could be their permission to begin. You're not broken, you're neuroplastic, you're adaptable, you're not stuck. You're just one decision away from transformation. If you're ready to go deeper, this is only the beginning.